Welcome, friends, to Sunday Word. This is September 19th. I'm going to read to you from Luke chapter 11, beginning to read at verse 5. It says this in the New International Version. Then Jesus said to them, "Suppose you have a friend, and you go to him at midnight and say, 'Friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread. A friend of mine on a journey has come to me, and I have no food to offer him.' And suppose the one inside answers, 'Don't bother me. The door is already locked and my children are in bed. I can't get up and give you anything.' I tell you, even though he will not get up and give you the bread because of friendship, yet because of your shameless audacity, he will surely get up and give you as much as you need. So I say to you, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. Which of you fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? Or if he asks for an egg, will give him a scorpion? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him?" As we begin to move forward in our plans for Bloor Central, the post-COVID Bloor Central, as we deliberately focus on making prayer foundational to everything that we do at Bloor Central, I've actually been reading a lot about prayer. There was one book I was reading on healing. I've been reading a lot about healing prayer. And there's a book called Authority to Heal by a guy named Ken Blue. And in that book, he made a really interesting statement. He suggested that before a church can begin to pray for healing in others, there are many churches that desperately need a healing within themselves, a healing in our understanding of who God is. Ken Blue discusses this in considerable detail, and it's interesting to realize that, for many, they pray to a God that they don't really understand who he is, or perhaps they've created a God in their own imagination. And so this God that they pray to, this a small g God, he's not really a God at all, but this small g God that people pray to doesn't respond. And the assumption is that prayer is futile. In actual fact, it is important for us to consider, who is this God that we're praying to? There's precious little point in us praying to a God that doesn't exist, to a God that we don't even know who he is. I've noticed many times when people ask me about, how do you actually pray, they've really been focusing on, they want a technique. They want like an instruction manual. They're very comfortable in having some sort of process where it's like step 1, step 2, step 3, and conclusion. And so you just go from one to the other, straightforward. It's a technique. It's just simply a skill to be developed. Now, when Jesus responds to the disciples asking, when they asked him to teach them how to pray, we recognize that Jesus didn't give them an instruction manual. He did offer the Lord's Prayer, which was offered as a framework, which was offered kind of like as a guideline. We repeat it now, which is not inappropriate, but Jesus' intention was that this was a framework for us to understand something of prayer. But more significantly, particularly in the passage I just read from Luke chapter 11, we realize that when Jesus is asked to teach them how to pray, he doesn't spend time talking about a certain technique. In actual fact, Jesus offers 2 parables. And in these parables, we are taught about relationships. There are 2 parables that I read earlier. One, a relationship between 2 neighbors, and the other one, a relationship between a father and the son. These parables have been misunderstood many times. Some suggest that these parables teach us that we need to nag God, that God is unwilling to give us what we need, so we need to nag him for it. And that there's nothing could be further from the truth. What we are finding in these 2 parables, when we really understand them, is that in fact, Jesus is pointing to a style of prayer which is based so much not on technique, but on relationship. He speaks about 2 neighbors. One neighbor comes to another. It's late at night. And it sounds like one neighbor's reluctant. And there's some wording here that might be some hard to understand. We need to really understand it in the context of community, how communities were set up in the ancient world. Hospitality was very important. And for a friend to come to someone's house and for me not to be able to offer my friend something to eat, that was a disgrace. But more than that, more than what we're reading here is, if the disgrace that would fall on me would not just fall on my family and my home, the disgrace would fall on my community. And so, if someone came to my house looking for food and I didn't have any, if I sent them away hungry, that disgrace would not only be with me, but it would also be on my neighbor. And so there is something going on here in this relationship where this neighbor goes and someone has a friend come, so he goes to the neighbor and says, I need some help here. And the word that is used there is audacity, shameless audacity. The neighbor didn't go asking for something that was unreasonable. The neighbor didn't go asking for something in his own, simply in his own interest. He was looking to save the reputation of the entire community. And so he goes to his neighbor. Now his neighbor really doesn't want to get up. It's late. He's tired. But the neighbor knows that this is going to bring disgrace. This is going to hurt the reputation of him and his whole community. And so it's because of who he is as a neighbor that he gets up and offers the neighbor that's knocking, he offers him all that he needs. He doesn't hold back. This is an important thing. So what we're recognizing here is there's a special relationship between these neighbors. And the one neighbor is responding because of who he is. I hope I can understand this. I hope I can explain this clearly. You see, when we come to God and we ask him to meet our needs, it's not that he's holding back, but God responds not based on who we are, not that we deserve it. He doesn't give it, when we give him a really eloquent prayer, that doesn't sort of say to God, oh, wow, that was a really beautiful prayer. Let me now respond. Because he gave me something so beautiful in that prayer, I'm going to respond by meeting his need. That's not the case at all. God is responding because of who God is. God is a God of love. And so when we come to him, he doesn't respond because we've done something special or because we're anybody special. He responds because he loves us. And we see that demonstrated, that relationship that is demonstrated between these two neighbors. When we come to God, this parable is reminding us that God is a God of love, and that's why he responds to us. And it's our relationship of love with him that brings us into this relationship, that brings us into this position where we can approach him. The second relationship that is mentioned is a relationship of a son and his father. Jesus is pointing out that prayer is an intimate connection between a dependent child and a loving parent. These relationships of neighbors, these relationships of a parent and child, they contradict much of what we assume in prayer. We don't earn God's response by praying in the right technique. His prayer is not based on us being good or religious. We don't have to talk to him like we're begging him to help us. We don't have to convince him. It's not about putting the right words in the right order. If we should sit or we should kneel or we should stand on our head. All of those things are completely peripheral to the central issue of prayer, which is recognizing the relationship we have with a loving God. We don't ask him, to do for us, it's not about asking what he can do for us or even asking what we can do for him. It's about being with him. Prayer is about just spending time in relationship with God, a dependent child, a loving parent. We don't have the right in ourselves to come into his presence. It's his invitation through his son, Jesus. He has invited us in. It's his hospitality. It's his grace. And that's the way we come before him in prayer.